What is up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Touchline Talk Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the content I put out on YouTube every single week. Plenty of Champions League talk here in the first segment with the first legs of the semifinal now complete. And then, second segment today, some MLS kind of news and notes, Open Cup games, a couple coaching changes that have occurred. So I'll be getting to all of that later in the show. But there's one place to start. That is the Champions League and what happened in these two first legs of the semifinals. Beginning with Real Madrid, Manchester City. The big takeaway here, it's kind of two parts, but it gets into the same big idea, is that both coaches are going to be very, very happy with where they're at. From the Manchester City side, unlike previous Champions League runs, and unlike last year's semifinal, Manchester City kept control of this game. That is Pep Guardiola's thing. He wants that control, and Manchester City had it. Real Madrid go ahead. It doesn't snowball. They have that good little patch at the beginning of the second half. They don't get the second goal. Slowly, Manchester City kind of regain control of the game. They don't let it spiral. And they keep it with that one goal. That's what Pep wants. On Carlo Ancelotti's side, game plan worked brilliantly. Manchester City offered next to nothing in attack, which is an incredibly difficult thing to pull off, but Real Madrid did it, right? You sit back, you give them the ball, and you try not to let them be dangerous with it. And that's exactly what happened. And then you try and hit them on the counter, you try and hit them in transition, and you trust your front three to finish the opportunities you create. And it was working perfectly until Kevin De Bruyne happened. And I saw Antonio Rudiger kind of make some comments that basically he was saying, look, we kept him in check. We're not intimidated going to the second leg. And he's right. They were brilliant defensively. So if you're Ancelotti, you go into that second leg knowing it's going to look a lot like this one probably because Manchester City are going to have the ball. And Real Madrid are fine with that. You proved you figured out how to do what you need to defensively to make sure that they don't run you over and to basically make them toothless. I mean, you look at that. I think the XG total I saw from StatsBomb was 0.5, if I remember correctly. And let's make one thing very clear here. Real Madrid had the better chances in that game, which is the really interesting part of this for me. Because Pep's going to applaud the fact that they had control for a vast majority of that game. And that the little bit that they didn't, they were able to navigate and it didn't snowball on them like it has in years past. The other part of that is if that is how Manchester City got through this first leg, and of course, you take the 1-1 any day of the week. You just got to win a game in Manchester, and you're going to extra time as long as you don't lose in Manchester. You take that 100% of the time if you're Pep. But they didn't get there because of Pep's system, which to me is the ultimate commentary here. And where Pep is going to continue to be evaluated when it comes to the Champions League until Manchester City win one, is can you win with this system? And I will continue to say, until I see an ability to adapt and to not rely entirely on this system, my answer is no. This was completely different from last year when I went to bat for Pep and basically said, look, it's Real Madrid, things happen. That was not a systematic flaw. That was just Champions League drama and Real Madrid, right? They had that one. They had scored the goals. They looked really, really good. They were awful in this first leg. And then De Bruyne popped up, and got to go back and give Real Madrid credit for their goal, too. Sensational. Vinicius, amazing. Camavinga was arguably the best player on the field. He just flies up the left wing, he sets up the goal. Vinicius finishes it excellently. That's what Real Madrid do, right? That's right in the playbook of how they wanted this to go. They don't need many opportunities, but when they get them, they're going to take them. And City are just kind of going along, not creating anything, not getting Haaland involved, nothing direct. And De Bruyne comes out of nowhere with a rocket very similar to Vinicius's to get the goal. That is about Kevin De Bruyne, his individual brilliance, which I've talked about time and time again. To me, there are two players on this team that you can't just throw into the Manchester City machine, quote unquote. That they are that valuable even in a team this good. And it's De Bruyne and it's Haaland. And so my theme has been Haaland gives you the ability to improvise and do things different and to just create goals out of nothing. And that's why I was willing to be open to the possibility that Manchester City could actually win this competition this time. And that I was picking them to win. I would argue my theory still held up. It was just De Bruyne and not Haaland who delivered that moment. Right? That is nothing to do with system. That is just Kevin De Bruyne being one of the best players in the world. Sometimes that's what it takes because you're not always going to be able to execute your system to perfection. And the question becomes, what do you do when that happens? And to Man City's credit, and specifically De Bruyne's credit, they found a way to survive a game in which they did not play well at all. And so it sets up this fascinating second leg because Real Madrid can just do the exact same thing like I mentioned before. They created plenty of chances. They could have had a second goal. And they can just sit back and absorb pressure again. The question is, can they do it for 180 minutes instead of 90? Or are we going to get into chaos mode? Let's say Manchester City get the opening goal, and now Real Madrid really have to go and push forward. Can Manchester City then keep the game within kind of their comfortable space? Or is it going to turn into chaos the way that Real Madrid have been able to turn pretty much every big Champions League tie they've been in recently into chaos? And then you get something like last season. It could go either way, depending on who gets that first goal. And then you start getting kind of the full analysis of this, because we just don't know yet. I can make the argument either way, and that's really where I'm at after this first leg. I can sit here and say, look, Pep's system created nothing. You can't win a Champions League playing that way. If they can't win this one, in a year where Real Madrid are not factors in La Liga, as good as they are in the Champions League, and as much as their style of play lends itself to the Champions League, and you're playing two Milan clubs who haven't even guaranteed that they're going to be in the Champions League next season, you're facing one of them in the final. If they can't win this one, what Champions League can they win? But on the other side, if they look a lot better in the second leg, and you go, look, they found a way to get the goal without it being perfect, and in a bad performance, they still got out of the away leg against Real Madrid with a goal and with the score tied. And then they did what they had to do at home. Now we're having a very different conversation. The question is, what will the second leg look like? Because the way this played out, just both teams are happy still. That's really my big takeaway, is that you can't say one got the better of the other. Because this is the ultimate test for Pep Guardiola's system. This Real Madrid team and the way they play, right? They are more than comfortable to give you the ball. You make one mistake, they're going to punish you. They're lethal on the counter. They will sit back and they will take Haaland out of the game. because Manchester City will not play to Haaland's strengths. This is the kind of game where it's fair to have a conversation about how much value Haaland can bring. Game to game, it's ridiculous because he's just so good, he's going to find a way. See the 51 goals he scored this season. But when City are so condensed and there is so little space because Real Madrid aren't really moving up the field, it makes it much more difficult to get Haaland involved. And specifically to play to Haaland's strength, which is playing balls over the top, right? Forcing center backs to deal with his pace and his physical prowess. He's still a very good player, but he's a much less dangerous one in a game like this first leg. So we are still waiting for all of that to get sorted out. But it should not be lost here that although Manchester City, I would argue, should be the happier of the two teams with this result, Real Madrid were the better team in this game. They executed this at a higher level. The game was played more on their terms. And Kevin De Bruyne came up huge. Again, this guy does not get enough credit, as much credit as he gets. I still think he is severely underrated. That's just me, but time after time in moments like this, he just comes up, and how many times has he delivered goals like that kind of out of nowhere? And you look at what he's done as they've turned this around in the Premier League and started to look like they're never going to lose again. How many of those big goals were Kevin De Bruyne? There just is no comparable player in the world to him. And so he came up huge again. Now the question is, can City find a way to create some offense out of this? Because that's not getting you through leg 2. Or can Real Madrid take it one step further and not just keep City in check, but really get the game into that chaos kind of frantic tempo that they thrive in? Because you're going to, on the Real Madrid side, just like I would argue City can't rely on getting an offensive performance, getting another goal if they're going to play this way in attack. I would argue Real Madrid can't afford to go into a second leg with City being this comfortable. They have to cause them more problems. It's just fascinating. It is so finely poised. It should be a phenomenal second leg at the Etihad.